I'm Joe Breyer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. It's good to have you with us. We're going to start this hour with that fiery collision in Tokyo between a passenger jet and a Japanese Coast Guard plane. On the latter, 5 crew members were killed. Miraculously, though, all 379 people on board the passenger jet were able to escape despite a broken intercom and smoke filling the cabin.
This morning, we're learning more about those terrifying moments. Investigators are on the scene, combing through the charred wreckage, trying to figure out exactly how this happened. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer is in Tokyo and has the very latest.
Investigators are combing through the crash site at Haneda Airport, which is just behind me. On-ground collisions between aircraft are very rare, so they're trying to determine exactly what happened. Japan Airlines put out a statement saying that Flight 516 from Sapporo was given clearance to land at Haneda, but then the surveillance cameras at the airport showed that when the plane did touch down, it appeared to hit something on the runway and then burst into flames, eventually skidding all the way down to the end of the runway to a stop, engulfed in flames. Inside, the cabin was filling with smoke, filling with panic. All 379 people on board, passengers and crew, were safely evacuated. They jumped out of the plane through black smoke, through sparks, through fire. Some are calling it a miracle. It is a tragedy, though, for Japan's Coast Guard. Why the Coast Guard's much smaller Dash 8 aircraft was on the same runway as the jumbo jet still isn't clear. 5 of the 6 crew members were killed. Only the pilot survived. The crew was going to be flying aid to the western part of Japan that had been hit by earthquakes on New Year's Day. Investigators with the Transportation Safety Board here say they will consider everything from mechanical issues to miscommunication to human error. NBC News has learned that they have recovered the flight and voice recorders from one of the aircraft, but they're still looking for the black boxes from the other plane.
All right, Janice Mackey-Frayer, thank you so much.
Now let's get to the southern border, where the Biden administration says border agents are seeing an improvement in the record number of migrant crossings from last month.
Senior administration officials say 4 ports of entry that were closed last month due to the surge in migrants are now set to reopen on Thursday. It comes as the Biden administration is locked in a legal battle with Texas Governor Greg Abbott over the use of razor wire at the borders. And lead Senate negotiators are now back at work trying to hammer out a deal on funding for the U.S. border. President Biden was asked about issues at the border last night as he was exiting Marine One on the White House lawn.
Southern border, are you going to do anything about it? The record number of migrants.
NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, as well as NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez, join us now. Good morning to both of you. Julia, I'll begin with you. And just a reminder here, U.S. Customs and Border Protection had said December was a record-setting month. Agents encountered more than 300,000 migrants at the border. So tell us, what is this change we're seeing, this improvement?
Yeah, that's according to sources who are predicting what they saw on average in December. Those official numbers really won't come out till mid-January, which could be pretty frustrating when you want more transparency. But what they are saying, at least the senior officials at the White House are saying, is that there was a drop in migrants just at the very beginning of the year. So they are taking somewhat of a victory lap on that. They had about 500 come through the Del Rio sector in a single day, which is a huge drop. That's where Eagle Pass is, where you've seen sometimes thousands there crossing in a single day and all being amassed under a bridge as CBP has struggled to keep up. But what I'm being told this morning is that there's been a pretty significant drop just in the beginning of the year, and that at this point there are no Border Patrol sectors that are over capacity. That means that when they take people in a certain sector and have to process them, no one is past 100% of their capacity, which means they're not forced to release people more quickly than they need to, which is what has happened in the past. But I am told, don't read into that too quickly. Obviously, we're still only in the third day of the year, and they think that really these fluctuations may just continue to happen, where you could see a record-setting high followed by a steep decline in the next few days. It has to do with weather patterns, what cartels are telling migrants, depending on when they might decide to leave their hometowns. There's so many factors here, but at least they are seeing some relief right now.
So, Gabe, the Biden administration and Texas Governor Abbott are at odds over razor wire along the border, along with many other issues. Let's break this down. Abbott says he installed the wire to prevent illegal border crossings. Then when Border Patrol agents cut through some of the razor wire, Texas sued, claiming the agents trespassed, that they damaged state property. Now the Biden administration is asking the Supreme Court to get involved. So what more should we know about all this? Where does this case go from here?
Well, Joe, as you mentioned, this is another example of the Biden administration butting heads with Texas officials. And as you said, the Biden administration is now asking the Supreme Court to weigh in. This comes after a court of appeals in Louisiana sided with Texas officials. And the Biden administration continues to believe that it has the authority to cut this razor wire under federal law. The Supreme Court, again, the Biden administration now asking the Supreme Court, yet to be known whether the Supreme Court will take this case up.
Julia, this week the Biden administration is also set to open 4 ports of entry. This is at the southern border that had been shut down due to this influx that they'd seen in the last couple months. What effects have those closures had on both sides of the border? What has that meant?
You know, I've covered closures in the past just from Washington, but I wasn't able to see the real impacts till I went to Lukeville, Arizona just a few weeks ago, where they had a closure there and they didn't know when it would reopen. We talked to business leaders there, small businesses in Lukeville, Arizona, a tiny town, where they said they used to see, 100 customers a day because people were going back and forth into Mexico. That dropped to 15. They were talking about layoffs, cutting hours, having to close their businesses. People who used to be able to see family members in a 25-minute drive, there would now be a 7-hour drive just to get around to the next closure. These have huge impacts on economies, both on the U.S. and Mexico side, because a lot of these people are used to going back and forth. There are children who live in Mexico and go to school in the United States if they have dual citizenship. It's really a huge impact to those communities. Just to see those ports reopen is a big victory for those communities who have really been fighting this for a long time. And we've seen the Arizona governor weigh in on this for a while, asking President Biden to do more to secure the border so that they could reopen this port of entry in a quick fashion. And I'm sure they're relieved to see it open now.
Gabe, let's talk about what's happening where you are in Washington. 3 lead Senate negotiators met yesterday with Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas. In-person border discussions happening for the first time since they left for the holidays. So where do things stand with all that this morning?
Well, Joe, senior administration officials aren't giving many details on those negotiations, only to say that they continued over the winter break and there was some progress. But as you said, those Senate negotiators met yesterday for the first time with Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas for about 2 hours. The White House this morning coming out with a blistering statement, though, saying that House Republicans are essentially blocking this supplemental funding request. And they say that it was the president that put forward this supplemental funding request, acknowledging that more needs to be done at the border, but that it is Republicans that are standing in the way. Meanwhile, Joe, today, dozens of House Republicans, about 60 of them, are going to be touring down at the border, down in Eagle Pass. Joe?
Gabe and Julia, thank you both very much. Well, this morning, New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez is facing new allegations of accepting bribes in order to aid Qatar's government. A federal grand jury filed a second superseding indictment on Tuesday. It alleges Menendez made positive statements about Qatar to help a New Jersey developer get a multi-million-dollar investment from a company tied to Qatar's government. In exchange, prosecutors say Menendez allegedly received cash, gold bars, Formula One tickets for a relative, and an offer of a designer watch. Menendez has pleaded not guilty in the case and denied all prior allegations of wrongdoing. His attorney released this statement saying the government's new allegations stink of desperation. Despite what they've touted in press releases, the government does not have the proof to back up any of the old or new allegations against Senator Menendez. They are turning this into a persecution, not a prosecution. These latest charges are wrapped into the existing charges against Menendez, alleging he accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in payoffs to benefit the Egyptian government.
Harvard University is looking for a new president this morning after Claudine Gay resigned. She faced a wave of criticism after testifying in Congress about anti-Semitism on college campuses. She was also facing growing accusations of plagiarism. Here's NBC News correspondent Erin McLaughlin.
Embattled Harvard President Claudine Gay stepping down, abruptly ending her turbulent 6-month tenure as the institution's first black president, the shortest term of anyone in that position. In a letter to the Harvard community, Gay writing, "It has become clear that it is in the best interest of Harvard for me to resign, and that it has been distressing to have doubt cast on my commitments to confronting hate and to upholding scholarly rigor, two bedrock values that are fundamental to who I am, and frightening to be subjected to personal attacks and threats fueled by racial animus."
Anti-Semitic rhetoric, when it crosses into conduct that amounts to bullying.
Calls for Gay's resignation followed backlash to this response at last month's congressional hearing, when Republican Elise Stefanik pressed her about anti-Semitism on college campuses.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
It does not depend on the context. The answer is yes.
Pressure grew in the following weeks, with Gay facing multiple allegations of plagiarism in her academic work. Harvard initially standing by Gay, but the board accepting her resignation, saying she had acknowledged missteps, but also faced deeply personal and sustained attacks. Stefanik claiming credit, saying this is just the beginning of what will be the greatest scandal of any college or university in history. Gay's resignation leaving the campus divided.
I'm glad that, it seems like we're moving in a direction where Harvard might begin to repair its public image.
I was flabbergasted. I was more than surprised. I was shocked. I don't think she was really given a chance from the start.
Gay is not the first university president to resign in the wake of that congressional testimony. You may recall in the days following the testimony, the president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned, and Congress continues to investigate all of this. Meanwhile, Harvard did announce an interim president, Alan Garber, while they say Gay will remain on as a faculty member. Back to you.
All right, Erin McLaughlin, thank you so much. Fears are growing this morning that the Middle East conflict could broaden. That's because a senior Hamas official was killed in a drone attack on the Lebanese capital, Beirut.
Lebanese and Palestinian officials have accused Israel of carrying out the attack. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied responsibility, but a senior Israeli lawmaker praised the IDF and Israeli security forces for, quote, killing the Hamas official in a post on X. The militant group Hezbollah has vowed retaliation, but the UN is calling on all sides to de-escalate.
The developments are extremely worrying, and I think this just really highlights what the Secretary General had just said about the dangers of the spillover of this conflict in the wider region. We are calling for maximum restraint from all parties. We don't want any rash actions that could trigger further violence.
NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley joins us now from the occupied West Bank. So, Matt, walk us through what happened in Beirut yesterday. Who was this Hamas official who was killed, and what are all the sides saying about it right now?
Well, it sounds like from eyewitnesses that it looked as though it was some sort of explosion, and then everybody kind of seemed to settle on the fact that it was, in fact, a drone attack. And that's what all the officials and everybody in Lebanon now is saying, that it was a drone that struck what sounded like a car in the neighborhood of Dahia. Now, this is a Hezbollah stronghold. It has a Hamas office in it, which is I visited a couple of months ago. And, this is a place, again, where we're seeing the bridge between Hamas and Hezbollah, two Iran-backed militant groups, both very opposed to Israel. And now it looks as though there were at least 6 people killed in addition to Salah El-Aruri. He's the deputy, second in command of Hamas. And what makes this so significant is that Salah El-Aruri wasn't just a senior official. He was also kind of the connective tissue, the bridge between Hamas and Hezbollah. He was the man who essentially sort of mended their ties after a lot of the uproar in the Arab Spring divided a lot of these groups and sent them off in different directions. He was the man who mended the ties between Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, and other groups. So the fact that he is now dead, and the fact that the Israelis, if it was in fact the Israelis, reached across borders to assassinate him in the capital of a neighboring country, that alone could instigate more violence and cause this anger and rage right here in the West Bank and other places throughout the Arab world to spill over and potentially engulf the entire region in war.
Matt, what's been the reaction to this attack where you are, but also globally? We understand France has been in contact with Israel on this as well, right?
Yes, we've been hearing that France has been in contact. I mean, the Israelis have been in contact with a lot of Western countries, not necessarily on the official level, but this has been ongoing since October 7th. Now, what I'm seeing here in Ramallah and the West Bank, and this is kind of the unofficial or interim capital of the Palestinians in the West Bank, there was a gathering here, about a couple hundred people, and they're still sort of gathering here. In this central square. This is a day of rage, and we've seen this quite a bit. There's been a general strike that was called by all Palestinian factions, protests throughout the Arab world. But for now, this looks somewhat muted compared to the scale of that assassination attempt. But I can tell you that everybody here is waiting to hear from one man, Hassan Nasrallah. He's the head of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Now, I just mentioned it's confusing. Hezbollah and Hamas. This Hamas official that was assassinated, he was essentially on Hezbollah territory in Lebanon. Hezbollah has been fighting against the Israelis back and forth ever since October 7th. There's been quite a bit of violence and quite a bit of Hezbollah fighters and some Israeli soldiers have been killed. But both sides have stepped back, refrained from going into a full-fledged war with each other. Now, it depends on what Hassan Nasrallah is going to say tonight. He's been kind of quiet for the past several months, but if he decides that he is going to enter this war in a full-throated way, that would be a bad, bad thing for the entire region, because it wouldn't just necessarily bring in Lebanon and Israel. It could also bring in Iran and the United States, which now has naval assets parked throughout the entire region. So really, the entire region is on tenterhooks waiting to hear what this man has to say tonight. Guys?
And Matt, amid all this, Israel still carrying out its aerial and ground assault on Gaza. What is the latest there?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is more of the same. There's been calls here among the protesters that I've been talking to once again for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, but we're continuing to see Israel pummeling targets within the Gaza Strip. Some 85% of all of the people in the Gaza Strip have been displaced from their homes. Where they're going, it's almost impossible because they're still hemmed in by this Israeli and Egyptian blockade, which has been in place for more than the past decade. We're also seeing now the death toll continuing to rise to horrifying levels. It was just yesterday that we saw the death toll in the Gaza Strip exceeding 22,000 people ever since October 7th. That is set to rise as Israel continues to attack. But the Israelis have said that Hamas, even as recently as New Year's Eve, have been able to fire rockets at Israel despite the massive military operation that the Israelis are launching in the Gaza Strip. So the fighting is still ongoing. It is still fierce. Guys.
All right. Matt Bradley. Matt, thank you so much.
Let's get you a check of your morning news weather now. The Gulf Coast is bracing for rain this morning.
Yeah, meteorologist Angie Lastman's tracking the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. We've got rain today. We've got rain in the future for the Gulf Coast. So some periods of really heavy rain on tap just as we get out the door this morning. You can see places like Louisiana into Mississippi, Alabama, and the panhandle of Florida already dealing with some rain this morning. Texas finally drying out. The good news is this batch of rain is going to move out pretty quick. We're going to see this scoot right along that Gulf Coast and bring a little bit of rain to folks across the southeast, too, by later this afternoon and into the evening hours. Before you know it, though, this system is long gone, and we'll see some drier conditions for the time being for folks in that region as we get into tomorrow. Meanwhile, out west, we've got plenty of winter alerts. What you see in white are the winter weather advisories. What you see in pink is the winter storm warnings. They stretch from the Great Basin all the way out into portions of the Sierra range, and that's where we're going to see the potential for more snow today as that Pacific storm that we were tracking yesterday continues to work a little farther inland. Here's the deal through your day today. The rain, the snow, they spread a little farther to the east. They do include parts of the southwest. Places like Arizona will see rain. A little farther north, you'll start to see the snow, and that stretches all the way up into Nevada through the day today. Most of that rain will start to taper off for folks right along the west coast. But as we get into tomorrow, or as we get into Thursday, we're going to continue to see this system moving to the east. The showers and storms will push through Texas, not looking at a great chance of severe weather. It's more going to be that kind of pesky rain with with the potential for some snow for parts of the southern Rockies. As we get into Friday, rounding out the work week, we start to tap into some of this moisture from the Gulf as the system works a little close, right along that coastline of the Gulf as we get into your Friday and round out our work week. You can see the rain across portions of the south, and we'll likely see the potential for flooding with the second batch of rain for folks there. And then by the time the weekend rolls around, the mid-Atlantic up into the northeast could see the potential for some snow, some rain, and kind of a wintry mix. Now, Sunday, that'll move a little farther to the north, and it'll move offshore. The I-95 corridor looks like we could see anywhere from rain to sleet to snow, and we'll also see the potential for some wind. It really depends on the exact track of this system. We still have a little bit of a disagreement with models, so we're going to watch that closely over the next couple of days to see kind of right where that rain-snow line sets up. But as of right now, this is your snowfall forecast for Friday to Sunday. People have been harassing me for snow totals, but an accumulation forecasted. But here's what we've got right now. If you live in places like Harrisburg, Scranton to Boston, we could see some moderate rain. Right now, it does look like we'll pick up some snow for potentially the I-95 corridor, places that have really seen a drought of snow in some spots for over 2 years. Here's what we're dealing with. A chance for more than an inch of snow this weekend. 70% for New York, 90% for Hartford, 80% for Boston, Washington, D.C. coming in at 60%. This is how long it's been since the last day of an inch of snow. So last calendar day that we had an inch of snow in Central Park was February 13th, 2022 in New York. So 689 days ago, more than 700 days in Washington, D.C., Richmond, more than 700 days, Baltimore, too. It's just really been impressive, guys, how long it's been since we've had some snow. And it could come to an end this weekend. But again, the track is going to be so important where it sets up. We could see a little bit of a rainier kind of forecast if it's a little farther to the north. But either way, if you live west of the city, if you live in portions of western Pennsylvania, you'll probably see some good snow.
Stop harassing Angie.
Yeah, please.
Don't harass her.
It wasn't me.
Give me a break. I'm not Mother Nature. It was Savannah. It wasn't. No, it wasn't.
All right,
Thanks a lot, Angie. See you in a bit.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.